How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects, candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with Rich Miller, the retired CEO of Virtua Health. We've been running down some of the steps in my 8-step framework that I use to drive better individual and organizational performance. And the third step is making sure that we're selecting people who are going to join the organization that we know are going to be a good fit for the culture. Because you and I both know that there are lots of talented people out there, just like we described in part one, and they shouldn't necessarily be part of the organization. They may be really nice people, but they're not really a good fit. I'm sure this was mostly in the HR area. But Rich, tell me more about how did you screen for people who didn't just have the skills, but that you were confident that they would be fit in the culture that you were trying to build at Virtua?
Yeah, we had a number of screening tools. In fact, we had behavioral assessments done by our recruitment team. And let me say something to people out there too. It's important to me. There's probably very few more important areas than your recruiting team. You need the best recruiting team you can get. And taking your time to hire your recruiters is crucial, because they have to be top shelf and people that really understand the dynamics of behavioral assessments and the right people to hire. So, we made sure we did our behavioral assessments with employees that came in, and they were done very carefully, and we made sure they were a fit in the location they were going to and a fit for the values of the organization and the behaviors of the organization. So that was very important to me. And that took time. It took time to build the right recruiting team, and I had the right recruiting leadership in the organization. And I spent an inordinate amount of time personally on that because I thought it was very important.
Yeah.
So to me, that was important. And the second thing I instituted was team interview process for management people. So we would do assessments, also behavioral assessments for managers coming into the organization that would lead people and manage people. So I put together teams of what I would consider our best people. And they didn't have to come from, if we were hiring a nurse manager, it didn't have to be a nursing person to do the interview, because that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody to assess who these people were. Were they going to be a fit in our organization? So I put a cross section of people together, and we set up these pods of interviewing teams across Virtua that interviewed potentially new managers. And my constant preaching was, don't settle here. If you don't think you have the right person, don't fill a slot. As painful as that is, if you fill the slot the wrong way, you'll pay for filling that slot the wrong way for 5 to 10 years. So don't do that. Make sure you fill the slot appropriately. If you don't have the right person, go back to the well and let's find the right person. So we had teams to do that. And actually, I got engaged a little bit with reviewing some of their findings to make sure what we were looking at. And they were doing a phenomenal job. And there were times we didn't, we needed a nursing director somewhere, and we just couldn't find the right fit, and it took time. But when we found the right fit, it was a grand slam. So people got to know how important this was. And they were proud to be on the interview team. If you were selected to be on the interview team, it was very important. So, that became another piece of what we did in hiring the right people.
When I think about what you're saying, it takes a tremendous amount of leadership discipline. And it goes back to my comment earlier that we both recognize that when I say that the most important element in the success of a culture initiative is CEO sponsorship, one of the reasons that I say that in my experience is you're the one who has the political weight in the organization to say to people when they want to hire that new nursing supervisor who's not necessarily a good fit, but I know they're not, but we're really desperate. We got to get somebody on board. We're short-staffed, and somebody wants to take that expedient step and just shortcut that. Somebody has to stand there and say, no, we're not compromising about that. And if it doesn't start at the top, you're the only one that's got that kind of weight to be able to convey to the organization.
That's very true, David. If they know the CEO's behind it and supporting, then they're fine. The other thing that I used to do, and we used to hold managers meetings monthly with my large group of managers, sometimes 300 to 400 in a room.
Mhm.
And I, I used to ask them every time I got them together, who fired a cynic this week?
Mhm.
And I used to say to them, don't be afraid to let go of somebody that is destroying your department,
Yes,
because they're destroying the people that are really trying to do a great job. So
absolutely.
they also knew I supported them on the other end of things to say,
Hmm.
we're going to make mistakes in hiring people, but don't freeze. Make a
Yeah,
good decision. If you have to let somebody go, let them go. Just
yeah,
make that hard decision.
absolutely.
Hmm.
So the fifth step in the overall framework, so in the way that I think about it, we define what we want, we create rituals to keep practicing these and internalizing them, we make sure we're hiring the right people who are going to be a fit, we integrate or onboard or orient them so that we make sure that that first experience is great to get them off to a good start. The fifth step in my framework is how we communicate about that culture. And so tell me about what are some of the things that you did. They could be visually, they could be otherwise. I think you mentioned that the star was displayed in a lot of different places. What else
Hmm.
did you do visually or otherwise to communicate the culture? How was that constantly stayed? How did you stay in front of people with the culture?
Well, it's a great question. When you have 10,000 employees and a lot
Yeah.
of patient locations, it's hard to do. You can't get in front of everybody. And I also had 17 surgery centers across the state, outpatient surgery centers. It was
Mm-hmm.
very difficult. But one of the things I actually developed at Virtua was a video production studio
Wow.
where I was able to do videotaping and speak to my people through videotape on some key issues. Examples were if we were doing something at the state level or we were having some difficulty with an issue at the state level, I would inform my employees by video,
Mm-hmm.
what was going on with an issue or why we were doing what we're doing or what you're hearing in the press. This is what this is about. So, I couldn't get to
Mm-hmm.
10,000 people, on a key issue all the time. So the use of electronic media and the use
Mm-hmm.
of video was crucial for me to get messaging out across the employee population. And people really they saw it. They really came across their computers. They were able to watch it. And I was able to have a dialogue also through Q&A with them to be able to do that. So on if it was an issue, David, that was something I had to do personally, I would go site to site and hold town hall meetings. That was another
Mm-hmm.
thing I did. So we would hold town hall meetings across Virtua where I would solicit input from people and they would be able to ask me any question. And I would give strategy updates and tell them where we're headed and what we're trying to accomplish, but really throw it open to them to allow them to ask me any
Right.
question they had. So, town hall meetings at certain sites could be 2 full days where I'm out at a site and I'm just holding an event in the auditorium or something, giving all employees an opportunity at different times of the day, post shift, pre shift, to come in and listen to what I had to say. And they were always
Mm-hmm.
well attended.
Nice.
So again, some of them were video type things. Some of them were in-person type things and
Mm-hmm.
I made sure the management team was well informed because on an ongoing basis, I made sure that we were constantly communicating. As you know, you communicate 1,000 times more than you have to.
Right.
Keep communicating the message and getting the message out there on anything you want to get out there because it's important that you keep reiterating the message to get things through to people and communication's everything. I mean, you
Right.
could have all the great plans in the world. If they're not properly communicated to the masses, they hit the ground and they don't
Yeah.
they don't they don't take hold. So yeah, I mean, there were a number of ways we did it video
Mm-hmm.
wise. We did it personally. I did it with my team.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of
Got it.
ways we carried it out. The other thing we did was we did picnics. I did the things where I would feed people, especially in the nice weather. We'd do something outside and we'd have discussions there as well. So there's a
Nice.
lot of venues that you
Mm-hmm.
could do it in. But
It
again,
goes
there are,
back to your, yeah, and it goes back to your point earlier that when I asked the question, why do other leaders not do these? Well, that's a lot of time commitment you just devoted that other people might not be willing to do,
right, right.
which underscores that. And I will say also, just you and I are showing our age here when you talk about video. taping. Nobody tapes anymore.
No, no, you're right.
The old guys like us use language like
Yeah, I
that.
still use that language. That will fall on some deaf ears. It's like that's like when I tell my grandchildren about a payphone, they look at me like I'm crazy.
What's that?
What's that? Right.
So the sixth step in the overall framework is all about coaching and how we use the language of our culture and our values as we coach people. And so I'm assuming that through all of the things you've been describing, your STAR initiatives, the core values, were so integrated into how you talked. I imagine they probably were in performance reviews and other parts of coaching.
They were constant. Performance reviews, you reviewed around the 5 points of the STAR. It was done. Everything was done through the STAR initiative. Anything we did. I actually introduced another GE product, which was Six Sigma and Lean, to my team, and that was done through the STAR initiative. So when people, what we used to call them were report outs, David, where they would report out on a Six Sigma project, and everything was done through how did it improve patient satisfaction? How did it improve employee engagement? So, everybody was tuned into the STAR initiative. It was all done and done through the STAR initiative. So there was nothing that we did that was not STAR driven, and people, they knew it. I mean, that was what they knew, and that's what they followed, and they knew that everything we did had to affect one of the points or multiple points of the STAR, or we wouldn't do it. It's as simple as that.
And that kind of focus gives people so much more clarity. Sometimes you see organizations and they have so many different initiatives under so many different acronyms and labels, and people just get confused. And it sounds like you brought more clarity by having everything come back to the STAR.
And you say that, it's so true. I see so many organizations where they have 12 strategies and, and the vision's so dispersed. And my point is, I would tell my team, we might have 3 or 4 strategies a year, and that's enough. We're going to focus on these. We're going to accomplish these. They're broad, but we're going to accomplish these and have people understand them. And when we talked about communication, the key here is not every person in the organization is going to remember every strategy. But what I ask them to remember is, if you're in environmental services, or you're in dietary, or you're in the billing office, what piece of the strategy are you providing? How are you delivering patient care? Because I always told my people, I don't care where you work, you're a patient caregiver. And I used the example to our billing office that our cash collectors, I said, we were able to buy a baby warmer in the NICU because you collect the cash that enable us to do that. So that's how you provide patient care. So I always tried to relate to the employee, no matter where they work, what a patient care provider they were and how they fit into the overall strategy of excellence in the organization.
Nice. So the seventh step in the overall framework we've touched on, and I call it the leadership example, and you really started there with it. Started with you being the example and demonstrating how much you authentically cared about people and getting out there. The eighth step, I call it creating accountability for our culture. And it's interesting, when you were describing in your management meetings, the large groups, and you would ask people how many people fired a cynic this week. When I talk about holding people accountable for the culture in the talks that I do, one of the examples I always give is that person, that cynic, that person that needs to be fired. And it's the ultimate demonstration that we're not kidding. We're actually serious about this, because if we're not getting rid of that person who's a violation of the culture that we say is important around here, we keep letting that person be here, well, then I guess we're not that serious about it. And so you got to be able to demonstrate that.
Yeah, and that is very important part of leadership. And they're the tough things that you really have to lead by example. And there were people I had that there were decisions I made in senior leadership of hiring decisions, David, that weren't optimal. Everybody looks glossy and clean when you hire them, and it ends up sometimes it's not that way. But you have to be able to make the tough calls to move in a direction. And I told my team, ethics and values, nobody will cross that line with me. And if they do, they'll be going in a New York minute. So that I would not tolerate. If somebody made a bad business decision, I can live with that. We'll figure out a way to move forward. and help fix those things. But values and ethics are things we don't cross. So I made sure our team understood, don't go there. Or don't. I don't want second chances for people like that. We
Right.
with that. So you made sure that people understood where you stood and what was important to you, and they saw that you took action when you thought it was appropriate.
Right.
And then they felt that they needed to do the same thing in their areas, and sometimes that's a tough thing to do. Moving people is probably the hardest thing you have to do when you have to sit with somebody and have that what we call the crucial conversation of things aren't working out. I'm sorry, we have to move on.
And it's interesting, I see this in companies all the time, and almost every leader has people that they wish they had gotten rid of sooner. It's kind of funny sometimes when I do a talk and we talk about this very topic, I will ask, I'll have a group of CEOs together and I'll ask them, how many of you have ever fired one of those people that you and I are talking about right now? And almost everybody raises their hand. At some point in their career, they've done that. And I ask them two questions. The first question I ask them is, okay, so what did everybody else say when you finally did it? And almost in unison, as you can imagine, they say, what took you so long? Thank God. We were wondering when you were going to do this.
What took you so long?
Exactly.
Right.
And then the second question I ask them is, what did you say to yourself after you made the decision? And almost in unison, they say, I should have done this a long time ago.
Right.
What took me? I'm glad I did it. And I'm kicking myself because I knew I needed to do this 6 months ago or a year ago. Right. And we waited too long.
Some of that is, and I'll say it, I'm a caring, kind person. I really like people. And it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And I get that. So I understand how people feel about that. But they also, I also tell them you have to consider the 100 other people that work with you and how that person's impacting them. And that you have to understand. So although it's difficult, it's the right call. And you have to move forward. You do.
What to your point on that, one of the things I sometimes emphasize about what you owe to the rest of the people is that sometimes when we don't get rid of that person, we're making vulnerable some of our very best people. Some of our very best people are watching this and thinking, if that's the kind of thing that's accepted around here, is this the kind of organization I want to be a part of?
Right.
So here we are protecting that. I sometimes call him the terrorist, the cynic. And meanwhile, we're making vulnerable the best people who we don't want to lose.
Because you just said it before that I always told especially my nursing directors, where they had a lot of nurses working for them on the floors, they said to me all the time when they finally got rid of the cynic, people around them would say, thank you for doing that. Yes. Because people, what happens, I told them, the leaders, what typically happens is people will tolerate it. You won't hear from them. Right. They'll tolerate this person. And then eventually some of them will leave because they don't want to be around it. But they're not going to vocalize it that much to you. Yeah. But if you take action, they're going to come and say, thank you for doing that. And you'll hear it right away. And it's amazing. You said it's something. Whenever I brought that up, you can see heads nod all the time. Yes. We know what it is. We hear you. We have it in our area, and we got to deal with it. So they accept that fact.
What's also interesting in my experience, I'm sure you've seen this too, is when you finally get rid of one of those people, not only do the other people say, thank God I was wondering when you were going to do this, but you also start to hear the stories of all the other things that were going on that were worse than you thought. People were covering for them. Yeah. Even while they were tolerating it, they were doing some of their work. They were fixing things. They were covering for it. It was a lot worse than you thought. And all that stuff comes out of the woodwork after you finally get rid of them.
Yeah, I used to call those, David, the smoke issues. And then the fire was raging somewhere.
Yes.
And all you saw was the smoke coming from somewhere. You didn't really see the fire. And there were a lot of fire issues under there. Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So this has been a great way of sort of capsulizing all the many things you did with tremendous success, in your days leading Virtua. So I'm sure, you're clearly a humble person. There had to have been things that you did that you said, oh, what a stupid mistake that was. And you learn some things from it and you think, God, had I only known that before, I wouldn't have done that mistake. What's one mistake you made along the way in your leadership journey that now with greater wisdom, you wouldn't do that again? Or you might advise somebody, hey, you're a younger leader. take my experience. You don't have to repeat the same mistakes I made. What's one of the mistakes you made along the way that you learned
Well,
from?
I think one of the bigger mistakes, I did hold on to a senior leader too long, is
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we just talked about. This person was not doing the right things, but was very good at manipulation. It's the old
Mm-hmm.
kick down, kiss up theory, but
Mm-hmm.
very good at it. And I didn't see it. Very bright individual, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see it for a while, and it was affecting the organization. And it was interesting because I didn't see it. And what disturbed me about it was, David, I was a little blind to it. I wasn't seeing it, which disturbed me. And at this point in my career, I wasn't a real young executive.
Mm-hmm.
I should have been smarter than that. So, of all the decisions that I didn't make, that was the one, and it was through blindness that I didn't see it. And eventually, I caught on, but it took a while. So,
Were
you know,
people telling you about it and you weren't
uh,
listening? Like, how were you blind to
well,
it?
I was looking at certain things that was happening and certain decisions, and especially at Best. I quote on a couple times at Best People Review and how things were handled in our HR review,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't optimal to me. And I started to pick up certain things, and then I started to ask some questions of people in the organization, my senior leadership team. And it's interesting that in some cases I was a little disappointed that I didn't receive feedback
Mm-hmm.
in a way. My assistant at the time, I did question her. I called her, and she was always dead honest with me, and she told me what she thought, and I could trust her. And then I knew something was wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
So once I did find out, I moved quickly and made some changes. But I think that would be the one. I mean, if I think of
Mm-hmm.
all the decisions that were made, there were always business decisions that you think weren't the most optimal, but
Sure.
the people decisions are the ones that really affect organizations the most. And as I look back on the career, you really have to keep an eye on those things and dig
Mm-hmm.
around and find out and
Mm-hmm.
what was going on. So,
Got it.
it wasn't it didn't kill the organization. It
Sure.
wasn't the end of the world, but it was something that I had to do a little quicker. That's all.
Got it. All right. So, two other questions for you.
Sure.
Question one, you are what I call a culture architect. You're somebody who intentionally designed, built a culture. Granted, you had lots of help. I know that you're humble
Yes.
enough to recognize that. So,
Right.
but having said that, so if you were talking to somebody who was young in their leadership career, just took over a company, and they look at the culture and say, it's not really where I want it to be. And you're having lunch with them and they say, Rich, you've been a culture architect. Where do I start? What
Mhm.
would you say to them?
The first thing I would do is when you say the culture isn't where I want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
I would ask, what do you want it to be?
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking to do? Because
Mm-hmm.
it starts with the leadership. It starts with the CEO. And I would have to find out, what are you trying to accomplish? When you say the culture's not where it wants to be,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean to you? How do you define that? So
Got it.
I'd want to know from somebody, what is it you're looking to accomplish? And when you say you want to build a culture, what does that mean?
Got
And
it.
and you're always building a company to perform at a high level. There's no question about that. Every company has to perform, whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit. They have certain performance indicators. They have to go through certain things. It's how you go through that makes or breaks the company. It's how the people deliver it is how it makes or breaks. So I'd want to hear what they think a proper culture is, and then I'd work from that clay model, if you would, David,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of shape it and help shape it for them. Because
So really,
everybody
yeah.
everybody has their own opinion about that,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody there's all different cultures. There's cultures, as you know, there's cultures within cultures, and you just have to make sure that you have to understand what the person wants to accomplish.
Right. So I guess it really starts with what I call the defining stage. We
Yes,
can't go out build it if we don't know what we're trying to
trying
build.
to
So the more
build.
clarity you have about that,
Right.
the more we can build a plan around that.
Yeah. Hmm.
Got it. All right. Last question for you. So you spent all these years as the CEO of Virtua, great success. retired to spend time with family, grandchildren, others. But I recently thought I saw that you've got a book out there now and starting to do some consulting. Tell us just a little bit about your book and the consulting that you're doing.
Yeah, my book is called The Leadership, A Matter of Faith, and it's out on Amazon.
Okay.
And it's a little book about my personal journey in life and, what happened with me in my journey, and then how I took the results of that journey, if you will, to build what I would call a great company. And, through my faith and through what I went through when I was a 21-year-old after a bad auto accident, I kind of took that journey and decided that I wanted to do something really special and different. So this book kind of describes that journey. It also describes a little bit about some what I would call atypical leadership guideposts that I put in there for people to read through. So, I decided that was good for me, just to capsulize what I wanted to tell people about what I consider great leadership and what's important. And then secondly, I just formed a consulting firm, Miller Devine. Joe Devine and I are building something we want to do is talk about this culture journey with people and help people understand what it's about. So we formed an LLC, Miller Devine Leadership Advisors, and we just started this. And Joe and I, Joe was the CEO at Jefferson Health, South Jersey. He just recently retired, and he actually came to me and said, let's do something. So, I said, look, I'd really like to teach more about culture and leadership, and that's what we're attempting to do right now. So we're just getting started, but hopefully we can reach some people. And my goal is to give back, David, to tell people what I think is important and help this country build great leaders and great companies.
That's great. If people wanted to learn more about what you and Joe are doing and your book, tell people where they would find you.
Yeah, they would find me at rich.miller at millerdevine.com. That's our website, and they'll get onto our website, and they could reach us through that.
Great. And the book, again, is called?
Leadership, A Matter of Faith.
Great. And it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
That's great. Rich, I really appreciate the chance to just catch up with you. It's been a while, and to just put more structure to hearing about the things you did so successfully at Virtua. I mean, congratulations, first of all. You created one amazing company. And I think it's really helpful to reflect upon those things and to be able to articulate that in your book and podcasts and others so that, as you said, people can learn from the experiences you had. So once again, I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast.
And I really enjoyed it, David. Thank you so much. And good luck to you as well. You're doing a great job out there. Keep it up. People need your advice, believe me.
Well, thank you, Rich. I appreciate you being on the show. Well, that's it for this episode of Culture Architects. If you enjoy the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so that every time you'll automatically get my new shows as soon as they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love it if you would leave us a review so that more folks like yourself can discover the show. I'll see you next time.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Be sure to join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders from all walks of life. To book David for your event or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of Forbes Books.